Welcome back to the Canadian Real Estate Channel. I'm Adam JD Martin, your host as always. And tonight we're going to be talking about networking. If you're like me, you've got a YouTube channel with, some 90,000 subscribers and, tens of thousands of views every week and every month. And you attend every single real estate meetup that you possibly can. You have a giant Rolodex of people that you can call on to get anything done that you need. But if you're not like me, this video is for you. Okay. So for those of you that have spent, years already building your network and trying to develop sort of those connections in the areas that you're missing and where your skills are sort of lacking, this video should help to give you a bit of a guide to get out of the shell and sort of fill in those gaps. And today I'm actually going to be bringing Peter, the Hungarian experiment, or Peter, the producer, depending on which Peter we want to talk to tonight. Pete's had a really successful career on YouTube, as well as just networking and getting into the social media world and starting up social mediation. And he's had a really, positive experience. The same with me. And a lot of it started here with the Canadian Real Estate Channel and with meeting Matt McKeever and starting to really understand the value of filling in those gaps of understanding what we can do, like what skills we do have, what resources we do have. Last week, we were talking about that three-legged stool, right? We've got the your skills that you actually have, your time, and then your money. And networking is actually one of those things that can help you to replace any of those legs, so that if you don't have one of those legs of the three-legged stool that is really just any business, then you can replace it by networking and helping to increase your ability to have leverage in any deal by simply networking with the people that have what you don't have. And so networking is absolutely paramount. It's been the number one contributing factor to my success, other than just the kind of blatant, drive to get to that goal to begin with. Like, I think first you really need a high amount of drive to get any type of major goals accomplished. And let's back it up. First, you need to have a goal. Then you need to have a really high conviction and high drive to get to that goal. And then you need to figure out what you have in terms of skills, money, and time, and then fill in the gaps with what you don't have. And networking is ultimately the tool that will help you to do that. So, Pete, if you're here, jump on in. I'm going to open my beer. I hope you guys brought your beer. This week, I'm back on the monkey suits. Hi, Pete.
Hey, how's it going, guys? How's it going, Adam?
Yeah, I'm good. I was just sharing my beer of the week, and it is actually going to be the Irish Stout from Northwinds again, the monkey suit. And I don't know why I just keep drinking these, right? Like all winter they make these here in Collingwood, and it's just one of my favorite beers. Here we go. It's one of my favorite beers to just have like one or two of, right? If you just have a casual beer, enjoy the flavors, enjoy the depth, very caramely, very kind of coffee type flavors going on here. I just freaking love it. So cheers.
I'm drinking water tonight, unfortunately. Last week and the last couple of weeks from behind the scenes, I was joining you, but I'm leaning down right now, so got to cut back on the beer, unfortunately.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? So part of this conversation today when it comes to networking is first understanding our goals, right? Like it's not useful to just go into something blind. Like if you're drinking for the sake of drinking, or if you're going out to meetups for the sake of going out to the meetup and just checking the attendance sheet, like that, it's not actually useful, right? So what Pete's talking about there, he's got a goal, right? He's going to try and get lean. Well, if you're going to try and get lean, there's certain things that you need to change about your behaviors and your inputs to get the actual output that you want. And part of our networking discussion, Pete, that I want to have tonight is first, obviously got to understand what you want in order to make changes in a positive direction towards that actual end state. But once you've made the decision, I want that thing, right? In this case, maybe it's another property, or maybe it's to raise more capital, or maybe it's to have a resource of people that you can look to when you run into these challenges in your real estate portfolio. And all of these things have one thing in common. It's just that you actually need to know what you want first before you start going into a room and start understanding how do I have that conversation, right? First, you need to know what you want, and then we can talk about how you open up that conversation and sort of some of the strategies and tactics that we've learned over the years for how to more effectively network. So Pete, why don't you just refresh the channel on sort of your background with social media and sort of where you're coming from?
Yeah, for sure. So I just to start off, I feel like many people might be able to resonate with this, but I find I'm more introverted in nature. Like, I don't love just going out and if I see someone talking to them randomly. Now at these networking events, I find it's a little different because, as Adam said, you have a purpose or a goal, and maybe you're not trying to like only get that goal done, but you do have something in the background where if I'm going to introduce myself and this person is on this level that might vibe with the goals I do have, there's a way to continue and further along that relationship. But for myself, I actually started back in 2015. I created a YouTube channel called The Hungarian Experiment, where I would just do a bunch of fitness and physique and also other kind of like psychedelic experiments and document the process. And what's actually fascinating about that is that led me to go to a networking group. And that's where I actually stumbled into Matt McKeever before he started this channel, the Canadian Real Estate Channel, and his YouTube channel. And even though, as Adam kind of said at the beginning there, like, you know, this channel is get tens of thousands of views every month and so many subscribers. My channel as well too, like I have 40,000 subscribers on it, over 10 million views. But it's actually those in-person networking and meeting people in real life that actually I find moves the needle. It's great to have all this attention and to leverage it. And it's great when you actually go to these networking events to be like, hey, like, great to meet you. I do this, I do that. You can go follow to learn more about that. But now let's actually learn about you. And I can talk about that instead of having to like touch on all these details. Or another aspect that I find is great of leveraging social media for networking is that if someone does know you from social media or the content you've created, it actually allows you to skip all the breaking the ice kind of talk. Like you get to right into some deep and interesting discussions with people. But I found for myself over all the years of creating content, it's actually going to these networking groups and connecting with people at these meetups that those relationships are like relationships now that I have clients with that I've been working with for 2-3 years long. And it's all because I met them there and it's been followed up with social media after. So I think networking is very powerful. And as I mentioned, I'm not a big person to go do that out in public. I'm a lot more comfortable behind the camera here, but super powerful for sure.
Yeah, I think there's an important distinction to make there, Pete, that you just touched on, which would be the difference between attention and connection, right? Because people like, and so one might ask the question, like, is it better to go to more in-person networking events where I get to meet less people, or would it be better to have like a one-to-many conversation like what we're doing right now, or like a podcast or something like that? And I would argue that it's very important to have connection over attention most of the time. At a certain point in your career, when you have a track record, a resume, a level of experience that you can look back and point at, I think attention becomes almost as valuable as connection. But I think that connection's the actual building blocks to the foundation that you need to build in order to establish a reputation that allows you to capitalize or leverage attention to begin with. So like, you know, one good example is like, you know, you could get 400,000 views on like a TikTok or something, but how many of those views would actually convert into lending you money or bringing you a private or off-market deal or being your contractor or submitting a resume to work for you in some capacity or volunteering for you, or just trying to think of some of the other ways that benefited just directly from networking. Like there's so much that can be gained out of true connection. Like when you actually establish rapport with somebody, you talk to them about your goals, you listen to their mistakes and what they've been through and help to learn yourself and get an education from them in order to be able to really visualize yourself going through that process and skipping those mistakes. They also, like people, again, like in terms of our three-legged stool, we have a certain amount of time, money, and skill, and they have a certain amount of time, money, and skill as well that they're working with. And so I find that one of the best ways to actually build true connection is by getting directly to that conversation itself. Like, what is it that you are struggling with in your business right now? And how can I help you with that, given that these are my variables in terms of that three-legged stool? Like I have a lot of time and skill, or I have a lot of capital and I'm looking to deploy it on a deal, or I actually don't have any of the three and I'm just looking to kind of learn and get a starting point. And so I think when we can get closer, and I love that you mentioned this too, right? Like if you can cut the fluff, like get rid of the fluff, you can get to these actual conversations really quickly and actually build a deep connection with somebody that you can leverage for both of your benefit. And cutting through that fluff, like Pete mentioned, like I think it is scary for people You mentioned you're kind of introverted. I'm actually a maximum introvert, and nobody would believe that about me, but it's true. Like, I cringe at the idea of having to like be in a room full of people, but when I do it, I know I'm doing it for a purpose. And so I have clear defined goals when I walk into any room like that, that I know if I focus on the goal, I can leave with something as well as contribute something to the room, so that I don't have to focus on the fact that I'm like openly sharing all my freaking information and I'm like standing there in the light. But I think the more we can actually be clear about what it is that we're looking for and what we have to offer, the more you can skip through that bullshit that you and I probably hate doing, like the how's the weather conversation. I hate that. Let's get to like the real conversation of like what I have to offer and what I think I'm looking for, because the person in front of you really isn't always the person that is going to end up being the one to help you, but they may know that person. And so if they clearly understand what you're looking for and what you have to offer, you might be able to just make a really quick, deep connection with that person and be able to move forward into an actual position of leverage where you can start doing deals or start doing something, right? Like something tangible. Whereas like the TikTok video that goes viral or whatever, there are fringe benefits to that, but it doesn't necessarily convert into real leverage that's tangible, right?
Yeah, definitely 100%. So Adam, I'd love to know, you asked me about like what I've seen and what's kind of come from me with networking and stuff. Well, what about you? I know you've had some great opportunities come around. I think people who might be watching this might be introverted like us, and they're like, I don't even want to go, or I don't see the benefits or the purpose, or like, you know, I might meet 20 people, but who cares? Like, what kind of opportunities would actually come from that to help me as a real estate investor? So what kind of opportunities have come for you?
Yeah, like I look at networking almost like I look at like how I look at like going to the gym or something like that, where like you never expect to go to the gym for the first time and leave like an Olympic athlete, right? Like it's kind of,
maybe some people do.
well, some people do, but those people are delusional, right? Like a sane, normal person understands that if you wanted to get like super athletic or super fit, like it would take a lot of repetition and it would take a lot of, hard days where like you don't really want to go, but you end up going anyways. And then the discipline that you would have to take as well outside of the gym, right? Like the thing about going to the gym and getting fit, it's not really all about that hour that you spend there, right? It's about the other 23 hours of your day that you spend with those regular behaviors of like diet and just like movement and what you're doing with your body outside of that hour. And networking is very much the same, right? Like you want to prepare yourself for the long game when it comes to networking. And I think like the best thing that I've been able to do with networking and in my experience is like understanding that like networking is one of these things where you need to have a lot of touches with somebody. Like the first time you talk to somebody is more than likely not going to result in anything. Like at the most, they might buy you a beer, right? Like that seems like pretty much the maximum expectation you could ever have of anybody you meet for the first time is like they might buy you a beer. But,
still a good deal.
But on the 10th time meeting somebody, if you've been consistent outside of the gym, right? If you've been consistent on your diet, on your habits, on everything that you're doing outside of the gym, when you go back to the gym, you have progress to share with that person, right? So in the context of what we're talking about with real estate, it's like outside of the gym in this context is like, okay, have you actually been analyzing deals, right? Do you know your numbers? Are you using a calculator, right? Or like, have you developed assets that you can very quickly look at a deal and understand whether or not the numbers themselves make sense? Have you familiarized with some of the common formulas and valuation techniques that we use as investors to be able to really quickly understand whether a deal makes sense to begin with? Have you actually thought about what your end state looks like in the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? What's your lifetime goal as an investor, right? Have you thought about the type of strategy you're going to specialize in? Have you thought about what exit strategies you have available to you if you specialize in that strategy? Have you thought about, because everybody's going to talk about it, have you actually thought about your responses to some of the common questions you're going to receive and what's going on in the world at the very moment? So like right now, the biggest conversation anybody's ever going to have with you at a networking event is like, wow, what about the rates? Right. And so what's your actual response to that? Right. Like, have you thought about what they're actually saying to you? Because when somebody says something like that to you, what they're actually talking about is their fear. right? And most people in networking situations, they do one of two things. They either project their fears to you, or they project their wins so that you divert your attention away from their fears. And so it's really important to understand when somebody's networking with you that, like, if you actually want the real information, you should ask them not about their wins, but about their failures, right? You should ask them about what they're afraid of, not about what was successful for them. And in doing so, you will uncover both. But if you just ask about their wins, you'll never get their failures. They won't want to talk about that. And so I think a big part of networking is understanding your goals, understanding that the person in front of you has their own selfish goals and motivations, and being able to direct the conversation towards the things that will benefit you by talking about them, right? You actually don't want to be talking about you a lot, yourself a lot as you're networking. You want to inspire people to share with you information that they have. And in doing so, because people are primarily self-interested, they will continue to talk to you in an enthusiastic way and find you interesting. And so for the people that are introverted and don't necessarily love networking, the ultimate hack is to not talk. Ask them questions. Ask the people in front of you a lot of engaging questions, but follow sort of a storyline. How did you get started? Right? Share a fear of yours to ask them for theirs, right? How did you get started? I'm scared that based on the numbers I've been looking at and the rates that are currently going on, that I won't be able to make the numbers work, right? So how did you get started? What was what was your path to getting through some of these challenges when you got started? Because I'm sure you had similar challenges to me, right? You probably didn't have all the money in the world unless you won the lottery or got money somehow, somewhere else. You probably had your own challenges, because remember, guys, like, here's another tip too. Think about the person in front of you, their actual timeline, right? And this takes a lot when you're first getting networking, because first of all, you're probably just scared of basic social interaction. And then you're scared of like not being enough, or you're self-conscious that like they have more than you, so they won't take you seriously, or like some version of that. But what you need to understand is like they had their own path too to get here, right? And so it's useful to think about how long has this person been in the game, which you can get very easily by asking them. And then really quickly, and the only way to do this is to know your shit. So first of all, when you go into networking, just know your shit. That's the easiest way to make it simple. Know your shit. And when they say, oh, I started investing in the 80s. Okay, perfect, man. I now understand that you went through a period where interest rates were 20%, not 5%. They were 20% in the 90s. So I know to ask, well, how did you get through that period where rates were 20%? And now all of a sudden you're the most interesting person in the room, because you understand that they were struggling at a certain point, and you're actually looking for the takeaways that you can use today as an implementation strategy. And they'd be more than happy to share that with you. So the key to networking really is to, first of all, just kind of know your shit, which is done by self-study, right? Like, do your homework, right? Watch a bunch of our videos here on the Canadian Real Estate channel. Go watch a bunch of Bigger Pockets or wherever else you might want to digest this type of content, because we don't always hit it just the way you need to hear it, right? You need to digest information from books, from podcasts, from channels like this, from all over the place, so that you actually fully get an understanding. And then you can ask the right questions, which are generally speaking going to be, again, about their mistakes, so that they want to talk to you about how they solved the problem. Humans are very interesting in that we're problem solvers. Like, have you ever just laid awake at night and just, you can't sleep because you've got that fucking thing going on?
Every night.
It's every night, right? But
every
like,
night.
if there's that thing, right? And it could be anything. It could be stupid. It could be like, oh, I didn't, whatever, pick up that thing, or like, I'm not sure if I put my shoes away or started the laundry or whatever. Like, it just runs in your head like a script. And I think we're all pretty much trained, however that is, to think like that. And so when you can ask somebody about their genuine problems and solutions that they've found, they're very enthusiastic about talking about it.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So I think 2 tactics or strategies that you laid out there is ask them the questions, and 2 is know your shit. Any other strategies? Like, do you have a game plan when you go into a networking event? You're like, all right, I have these 6 questions in the back of my mind that I'm going to generically ask each person, or you're more seasoned at networking, so maybe you're a little bit more loose with it. But what other kind of strategies do you have for those who are heading to networking events?
Yeah, for sure. And also, can you hear me perfectly? Because I just got some crazy connection stuff there.
Yep, good on my end.
Oh, okay. You're coming over like a transformer, so I don't know. One of us is kind of bugged, but I'll keep going. So in terms of my actual like networking strategy, I don't go in with like a set of questions or anything like that. Sometimes if I know if there's a particular person going to be there in attendance, I'll make a point of like looking them up first and make a point of like understanding their background and generally speaking what strategies they invest in. And a lot of the times you can do this by just like doing some quick social hacking. So like, you know, if it's a Facebook event or something like that, like a lot of the times you can see who's going and like who said they were going to go, and you can just kind of creep through the attendee list. I don't think you can do that with Eventbrite, but like for Facebook and other social media type things, you can definitely do that, and it's worthwhile because like again, if you know what you're looking for and you know somebody else in the room has that thing, it's a lot easier to actually go and and ask the right questions of those people to specifically get the thing that you're looking for. So I think that's like really important to do. But in terms of asking specific questions, like all of my questions are going to be they're going to be open questions, so nothing that's yes or no, unless it's like actually like a very simple yes or no question, but open questions that inspire somebody to tell me the whole story, right? So I want to know like
no yes or no or one answer type questions.
Yeah, because like the people as well, like a lot of people are going to be scared as well at the event. And so I guess that's another understanding is like you're not the only one who's scared to be there. Like everybody else is also scared to be there, right? Because like, and again, this is all just history of how we got here, right? So like humans at almost any other point in our lifespan in history, like if you were the one up at the front of the group, it's because you fucked up really bad. Like they were about to stone you, or you were there, or you were the leader. Like that's it. Those are the options. And most of us understand that we're not the king, right? And so that's not really an option for us. And so we have that social anxiety. So I think it's really important to just understand that like you just want to ask questions that inspire them to either ask you more questions or to tell you the whole story. And a lot of the time, those questions are going to be steered. They're going to be aiming you in the direction of the strategy or the goals that you have and questions that you need answered. And I think that's like the real simple approach is just like stay on task. Sometimes people will try and take you off into the weeds with some crazy ass story or personal issues that they're having. And the real key is to acknowledge it, right? So generally speaking, agree, acknowledge, and then absolutely pivot back on to whatever path you were on, right? So like if they're, you know, you ask about their failure and they just tell you for 30 minutes about their divorce, that's fine. You just need to be like, man, that sounds like it really sucked. And how did that affect X, right? As you're trying to get back on path of actually understanding the strategy itself better, or how you can avoid the mistake other than the divorce or whatever, if that's not relevant to you. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of an art, but again, it's like a muscle that the more you flex it, the more reflexive it becomes. Like you can very easily keep somebody on task and acknowledge their points, right, without being rude, and then just get them back onto whatever it is that your takeaway needs to be.
Yeah, definitely. I have a question for you here. I'd love to know your recommendation. So you said one of the good strategies, like to know your shit. What would you say for people at different levels in the investing game? So like, let's say someone who is not an investor, they want to get into it and they're going to this and they're just looking to learn and make connections, versus the person who, you know, maybe they have their primary residence and they're house hacking and they want to step up, versus the guy who's got 10 units, versus like the Casey Wongs out there, right? Because I think we've even heard from Casey, like he does go to these networking events, but he's even networking when he's like at the bank and he's like talking to someone behind him, because there's different opportunities there that he might not even get from going to these networking events, because he's more looking for capital, right? So what would you say, depending on your level as a real estate investor, or again, maybe you're not an investor at all, what are you coming there kind of like prepared for, right? Because as you said, like you need to know your shit and come with some kind of goal. So what's the different goals? Like, should you even go to networking events when you're at a Casey level? Or if you're still like house hacking, like, is it worth going to these networking groups?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And the answer is actually kind of a simple one, but it's the first thing that came to my mind. The earlier that you are in your investing and networking career, the closer you should be to the stage. Okay, so select a topic or an event that caters generally or broadly to what you're trying to learn about, right? And the earlier you are in your career in both your investing and your networking, the closer you should be to that stage. So if you're just getting started, then probably the person on the stage has a lot of information that will be very well thought out. It should be relatively punchy. Like it should be thought through in a way that will be easily digestible, usually with a slideshow or something, so that you can actually learn something at the event. And in that case, you get to learn all this information. And then after the talk, you get to network with all the other people that are at a similar level to you. The further you get into your real estate and networking career, the further away from the stage you should be, right? And so as you start to learn the basic content, as you start to learn the fundamentals and you have them like the back of your hand, you know what the person on stage is going to say, unless they have a truly novel strategy, which I've never seen in my life. Then you should be not in the room listening to the person on stage, because it's just some idiot like me. Like, go watch me on YouTube. I've already thought out all of my ideas on YouTube and expressed them in succinct ways that are edited. And so there's no there's no ahs, there's no bloopers, right? Because we cut all that stuff out and released it on April Fool's Day. But the guy on stage, there's going to be bloopers. Now, one reason why you might go to the stage show, though, is so that you can actively ask that person a question that you might not get access to later. Okay, that's a good reason to actually stay in the room. But better than that, once you understand the fundamentals, is just get out of the room, right? Be in the hallway. And so if you're ever at a real estate investing or sorry, any networking event, really, the people in the hall are either total idiots, right? They just don't even know that they went there to do something. They're like, I'm just here because I don't know, I go places. Or absolute killers. Those are the only people in the hall. Okay. Mm-hmm. So like complete idiots and absolute killers. I'm usually both. So
this is legit. I've been to dozens of networking events and recording at these real estate events. And what Adam's saying is true. Everyone watching the stage are learning, but the people out in the room, usually like there's killers out there and then people who don't know.
Dude, you're either at the stage learning or you're in the hall earning, right? Because you're past the learning stage, implementing, right? You're starting to actually act on these strategies. And I think that's really important, is the ability to meet with the other people that have already learned, so that you guys can talk about either mistakes that you've already made that you need a solution for, or opportunities that you'd like to work together on in the future, right? And so that's where, being in the hallway is really important. And I think that works for like almost every level after the learning stage. So like you could be at my level, or you could be at Casey's level, because it's understood that like you actually never know who's going to be in the room. And that's another really good takeaway is Casey Wong, for example, is going to show up in a white minivan. Okay. A white Toyota freaking minivan, wearing a winter jacket from 1980 fucking 5. And so when you're
jeans and a black shirt,
jeans and a black shirt every time. And so when you look at Casey, it's not that hard to pass him over visually for the dude in the suit or whatever, right? So it's really important to understand that at these events, sometimes the most modest looking people or the most unlikely person that you're thinking about could actually be the assassin in the room. And so it's really important to approach these networking events with a very, very, very humble and open approach, so that you're asking questions and also offering value where you think you can. And just being truthful and transparent, I think, is important as well. Like, if you're trying to say that you're like some crazy killer investor, and then you start talking to Casey, like, he's going to find you. He will figure you out quickly, and he will be like, this guy's a fucking idiot. And instead of learning from him, you will have pissed him off and made him disregard you, or made him question your integrity or whatever, right? So it's really important to just be very clear with people where you're at and what you're looking for, and to just see what you can get, right? Like, it's trick or treat out there. But it, like, people will find you if you're trying to represent facts other than how they are. So I think that's important. And then, yeah, I mean, like, the absolute killers like Casey's of the world, they're going to be networking at different levels, right? So cheap meetups, free meetups, regular meetups that happen all the time from a real estate context are fantastic. But there's other ways too to network, to get yourself in the right rooms. So for years, I always talked about this. Like, I always, if I'm wearing a watch and it's not my like Apple Watch or whatever, I'm wearing Rolex, right? And it seems like kind of a funny thing to point to, but it really is a business card. Like, it's kind of like a business card that follows you into every room. And when other people that have Rolexes see you with a Rolex, they automatically check a box in their head that says, okay, they've established some sort of professionalism, right? They've got some amount of discipline, and it's a decent icebreaker for me. Now, I'm a watch guy, so I use that, but you could use anything else. Like, in the, a lot of people use cars because they like cars as well. But whatever profession you're in, I mean, if you were into cameras, or you're like Pete, like, maybe the thing is to talk about what gear you're using or what works well for you or whatever, right? And to have it on you, people are going to notice what you're using. And so it's like, there's just levels to it. So with the Rolex thing, people from all sorts of industries, all sorts of net worths, all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of cultures and whatever wear Rolex, right? So it starts conversations with, I've had conversations with lawyers, I've had conversations with judges, with accountants, with sales guys, with other investors that catch me at an airport or something like that. Like, it can start a conversation if you let it, or if you make that into a thing. And so I think that's one way. Another thing is different clubs. And so, like, in London, I was at the London Club, which is like, whatever, there's fees, right, to join. And so it just sort of, it adds a level of buy-in that that everybody in the room has paid X amount of $1,000 to be in the room. And so it's not that it tells you they're going to do business with you, but it tells you that they're a credible person, so you can separate out some of the noise from the signal, right? And so
you're saying you can network as a real estate investor outside of real estate investing network groups? So you go to other networking things?
Exactly what I'm saying. Whoa. Yeah, I know it sounds like rocket science, but it's really shocking how many people I'll talk to, and they're like, well, there's no events going on in my city. And I'm like, oh, really? There's no events. There's no chamber of commerce. There's no accounting things going on. Like, there's no CPAs that meet up in your town. There's no country club. There's no golf club. There's no ski club. There's no whatever. Even like a hunt, like a shooting range, or a gun and rod club. Like, man, fuck, you can find people anywhere that have resources. And again, it depends on what you're looking for. Are you looking for time? Are you looking for money? Or are you looking for skills? Right? Like, trade shows. Dude, trade shows are all over the place. Toronto, Barrie, and we're in Ontario, so I'll reference that. But like, Toronto has trade shows all the time. Man, you want a roofer? Go to the roofing trade show, right? You want a framer? Go to the builders trade show. Like, go to these places, right? There's all sorts of these goddamn meetups that happen all the time. And it's just like, what do you need?
think you're great at too is like, you'll go to a restaurant that like you enjoy and like, and you just become the local guy there, and the owner knows you, and then he might connect you with someone too. Like, you're really good at, like, wherever you want to establish yourself, you manage to network and meet people.
And I appreciate the compliment. And I need to share, though, that that's not because I'm good at it, right? That's just That's about be consciously doing it and then doing it consistently, right? It's the same as the gym. It's not because you're good at working out that you get fit. It's the discipline of going and consistently having the behavior and habits that you need in order to get fit that gets you fit. It's not because genetically you're a fucking superstar. Most of us aren't. Like most of us kind of suck actually at networking and at physical fitness, right? Like we're not good. But the reason and what Pete's talking about is like, I'll take Antler in Toronto or Hunter and Co in London or whatever. Like
that's exactly where my mind went.
Yeah. So I'll go to Hunter and Co and what I'll do is I'll kind of cheat. Okay, I got a bunch of tips right now. And this is tripping me out because Pete, you keep freezing on me. So I don't know if my internet's really screwed or what. But I'll take a list. Okay, so I'll take on your iPhone or whatever. If you're one of those degenerates that use an Android phone, just open up your notes, right? And on your notes, every time you go to a restaurant, learn all the servers' names, right? Learn the bartender's name. Write it down in the goddamn note section and label it. Label the restaurant, write down their names, get to know them, get to know just a little bit about them, 2 or 3 points, write it down, right? So at Hunter & Co with Shannon, right? I know everything about Shannon and I know everything about the bartenders there. And then you get to know the owners and they're like, hey, Shannon says you're in all the time. And the reason that Shannon even bothered to tell the owner that is because I'm there all the time and I care, right? And I'm interesting to her because I ask her questions about her life and the things that she cares about. Remember, I'm not doing the talking. I'm asking the questions to get her to do the talking so that she thinks I'm interesting. That's the way this works, right? Show genuine interest in people. This is How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? I forget. Is that It's not Carnegie. Who is that?
Yeah, Carnegie.
Shoot, I better look this up.
Dale Carnegie.
It is Carnegie. So Dale Carnegie, if you guys haven't read this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it's fantastic because it teaches you to genuinely be interested and actively listen to people. I just add a level of repetition to it by writing it down in my iPhone, which is not really cheating, but it really helps if you haven't been to that restaurant or whatever for over a month or something like that. You don't really remember Shannon's story. You've got it all written down so that when you go in, you go, Shannon, how are the kids, right? How's dance going, right? How's soccer been? What do you guys do over the winter? I know he's a soccer player if you're in a different season now, right? And then you're like, and she's like, oh, he's taking snowboarding lessons. Awesome. Add that to the note, right? How did that go? And so you get to become genuinely interesting. And you actually do get to befriend these people, but it serves a purpose, right? Because there's countless times that my barber has sent me leads on people, whether that's lenders or deals. Countless times that I get to go into these restaurants and, I'll chum it out with the staff and we get to eat for free or we get free drinks or they invite people over to our table that we otherwise wouldn't have talked to. And they say like, hey, you guys will probably connect. You guys would probably be friends. So why don't you guys chill? These interactions, when you start being consistent with this stuff, interactions come to you, right? And it becomes a lot easier to manage and it becomes a lot less scary because you become the prize. And I forget what book talks about you being the prize, but there's a great book out there that talks about that. And it's really good because it allows you to just sort of be yourself and open up to people and have them come to you saying like, oh, Shannon said I should talk to you. I'm a whatever mortgage broker or a lender or whatever. And you can just really cut down the time it takes to get to those good conversations. So yeah, I like that strategy a lot.
Awesome. So it sounds like in the back of your mind, it's kind of like, I always got to be networking when I'm out and about. But when it comes to these actual networking groups and meetups and the different levels we kind of discussed, like maybe you're brand new, you're not even in real estate, or you got a duplex and your house hacking to your Casey Wong or in between. how frequently should you be going to these? Like when you're new, should you be going to a ton of them and then kind of fade off as you start building connections? If you're a more experienced investor, like you should be doing at least once a month. Do you have any recommendations there? Or is it all the same no matter what level of investor you're at, going specifically to these real estate networking groups?
Yeah. So I think it's important to network consistently, right? As I've mentioned a few different times on this, consistency is the number one thing. So I think what you should do is get consistent if you can. Get consistent if you can at whatever you can actually commit to, right? So if there's like 2 or 3 meetups, for example, that you can commit to going to every single month and actually be there every month, that's the right level of commitment. Maybe in the start, you can actually like ramp it up a little bit more than that and like go to almost everything and like go to even networking events across multiple cities like we used to do. So we would go out and like, we made ourselves interesting or at least visible by wearing these red jackets. And so everybody would recognize us as the guys in the red jackets. And so we would just get people to come to us to talk to us about the jackets, even though they were just like, whatever, right? Like we spent like $300 or $400 each on these freaking jackets and they just became a conversation piece. But we would go across all the way down the 401 and go to like a different meetup every night. Now, that I think is not necessarily productive for the person who is on the way through the learning phase and into the implementation phase, because you just need to spend time actually doing the goddamn work. So that's another trap. Like that's a real trap that I find people get into, is they become that networking junkie, right? Where they are at every single event all the time, every day, in all the rooms, constantly not making forward progress. And that person also gets a really bad rep, because you're like, dude, when do you work? Like, do you actually ever do anything? Like, do you actually do anything productive? And I think that can be confusing for the people that run into those people, because you're like, wait, didn't we have this conversation? Like, weren't you talking about this last year? And those people, like, I think, at least for me, I lose respect for pretty quickly. And that's not even just being rude. It's like we all only have so much time. And so you need to be able to manage who and what you're going to spend your time on. And like we've always said, right, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And then I always add, and the media you consume. So it's important to make those 5 people productive. So if you're one of those people that are just constantly at events, but not actually implementing anything, then like people start to count you out of their 5, because they just can't trust you to be productive. Mm-hmm. So I think your frequency really just comes down to like what you can balance between actual productivity and also consistency on the side of the networking. So like for me, I go through seasons of this where like I haven't actually been out networking at an event or something like that for a long time, because I've been a little bit disenfranchised with the whole model for a little bit as well, where like I keep hearing the same goddamn things and nothing feels new, right? But the reality is also that my goals are kind of screwed up right now. And again, that's how I started this. If you don't have your goals, it's really hard to go to these events and make it productive. And so right now, I'm working on just establishing again better my goals and how I want to implement that as I go through the world networking now, right? So like my priorities have shifted from real estate investing for rentals to more education on real estate investing and the YouTube front of things, right? And so as our focus has shifted, I've really changed my approach on how I go to these events. So yeah, actually we're going to go do a YouTube talk for an event coming up soon, where I'm going to share some of the kind of pros, cons, insights about having a YouTube channel and social media itself, and what that's been able to do for me, and share that. So we're going to be scheduling that probably for April for Lyric, which is the London, whatever, real estate investment crew or whatever. We always used to call it the Old Boys Club in London. So
I think we got a Londoner here, him too. Ryan O'Donnell, you should come out and check that out when it's going down in April. Stay tuned to the socials and you'll see that. I really like your recommendation there about the frequency. So it's a balance, right? And then I really liked what you said there as well too. About like the red blazers and stuff that we were wearing when we went to networking events. And I know as well too, we featured way back now, but Matt and I went and flew out and visited Investor Girl Britt. And when she goes to networking events, she wears these bright, sparkly pants. And it's like an open invitation to come talk to me, like talk about this so we can break the ice. Or I've even seen this guy, I don't know his first name, but he's Taco Bout Investing. And he wears like a hat that looks like a taco. And so you don't have to do something like that, but when you do something, you have something bold that stands out. It kind of helps it allows other people to break the ice to come talk to you. So I thought that was a very good recommendation there and thing to bring up. I have another question though. Where do you find these networking events? Like, how do you find them? Is it all online? Like, where do you even see these and know where they're at?
Yeah, and I think we have a comment there from Cody, who's living in Nunavut. Which is interesting because like Nunavut, I don't know much about that area, but I can make some assumptions again that it's not a lot of opportunities here, as was said, to get out and find these things. And to that, I would say, again, and this sounds like a broken record, but first, what's the goal, right? So like, is your goal to invest in Nunavut? If it is, great. That's actually a good thing because there's only going to be 3 other people that do that. And so your mission becomes find the 3 people, network with them, right? However you have to do that. And so that might be like literally just tracking down what do they own? How can I figure out where their tax bills go? How can I figure out who owns the damn thing by networking with realtors? How can I get a message to that person? Put a goddamn bat signal up, whatever you have to do. If the goal though is to like invest in London, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, some major city with a real population, there's going to be tons of ways to find these things. One great source is Eventbrite. I find Eventbrite always has the events. Facebook events is a real thing now that people use a lot. Facebook groups are often a really good source. So there'll be all sorts of groups that just say like real estate investing Toronto or investing for cash flow Montreal, but whatever that is in French, I guess. There's going to be all sorts of groups available to you on Facebook. Eventbrite. What else is there?
I would say like go follow a bunch of these real estate influencers as well too, because they're regularly sharing whether they're going to a meetup or whether they're hosting one.
Yeah, and also like I always like to think too of your power team, right? So your power team's a really good source of leverage. So your power team is generally speaking made up of, a lawyer, a real estate lawyer. So this is the person who processes every single real estate transaction, right? So they know who's talking about real estate and where they're talking about it and when they're talking about it, because that's their whole life. Real estate agent, you always need a good agent, especially an investor focused agent. And they're going to be screaming that from the rooftops. Like they'll advertise that. So that person for sure knows where the meetups are and when they happen. Ask them to bring you to one, right? It's not actually a big ask. Hey, if next time you're going to that event, would you mind giving me a call? I'd love to go. Right. And hopefully I find the deal I'm looking to buy there. So we all win here, right? You get to make money. I get to make an investment. You've got your accountant. They know a lot about what's going on in the scene. You've got your contractors. They might not be going out to events as much as some of the other guys that I just listed. But they'll actually know like where the hangs are, right? Like maybe they hang out with a bunch of contractors and you should go network with them at like a pub and like literally just like have beers with the contractors, because that'll introduce you from like the carpenter to the electrician to the plumber to the roofer to the handyman. And so I think that's a really good source too, is just talking to the actual people at the source of what you want, and leveraging your power team for that stuff if you can't find things online. And so Cody just said like goal is Nova Scotia, right? So like, cool. There's going to be 500,000 groups on Facebook that are called like investing in Halifax or cash flow in Halifax. Actually, what's the we have a buddy that moved there, right? Colby.
Colby. I'm not sure.
Damn, I'll think of this. But one of our he's gonna kill me if he ever watches this. Although he's not watching this because he's somewhere sitting on $1 billion of cash flow because he bought every house in Nova Scotia. Damn, I had a beer with him at a pub in Nova Scotia. I'll think about this as we continue the stream, but he moved out there right from Ontario, sold his properties, bought like he like 10x'd his units in Nova Scotia a couple of years ago. And that worked out really well, but he makes a lot of content around just investing in that area. So there's going to be YouTube channels about that. We forgot about YouTube. We're idiots. So YouTube channels about that. Power team members there. We've got so Power team members, YouTube channel, Facebook events, Facebook groups, and you could even find like news articles, right? Like you might be able to read about like groups that are happening or find journalists that comment on real estate. Ask them, right? Like, they'll be connected. You could talk to the Chamber of Commerce in that city. You could talk to the landlord, call up somebody at the landlord tenant board and be like, hey, where do the meetups happen? I'm from out of town, right? I want to make sure I'm educated so I don't ever have to see you, right? Like think outside the box, right? Like when we were looking for off-market deals, one of the strategies I used at one point was to just go and sit at the landlord tenant board and wait for all the people that were there because their tenants hadn't paid them for a fucking year and they're pissed right off and they're ready to sell. And so, right, I'd wait there in the courthouse and be like, are you sure you want to keep that building? You sure about that? Right. And then you got your source of deals right there. So, think outside the box with this stuff. We can get creative however we want.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I don't want to just shill my clients here, but one of my clients is Wealth Genius, and they are a real estate education platform, and they host boot camps. So it's not just a meetup; it's an extensive 2-3 day event. Or they're also doing like Investor Fest and stuff like that, where there's huge rooms and everyone there is there to learn and to grow as investors. So if you're interested in that, they were just in Halifax last weekend. Alfonso, the Godfather of Real Estate, hosted a boot camp there for 2 days, and they're going all across the country. And right now they're actually in Dallas, Texas, doing like a boots on the ground event. So I think, as I was mentioning too, like following these influencers, seeing what they're doing, how they're connecting with people, like Thomas Larini, who, came to our first Vegas entrepreneur experience that Matt and Jeff hosted. That's how we met Thomas. And now he's working with Alfonso with Wealth Genius and hosting these boot camps and events. So it's a big part of networking and meeting these people. Find out who they're following, right? Like I think we have investor Amy here who said like Britt is brilliant. If I didn't bring up Investor Girl Britt, like I wouldn't even see Amy pop up here. And now there's an opportunity for us to maybe connect and be like, well, who else are you following? Who inspires you? Because I think a lot of these people resonate with different people on social media as well too. So you might find someone by asking someone or seeing what someone else shares on their social media that you never would have known about as well too. So, and leveraging YouTube, of course.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually the other thing I completely forgot about, which is kind of hilarious, but there's all sorts of like mastermind groups out there, right? Like there are larger platforms like the Key Spires of the world, the Rich Dad Poor Dads of the world. I think there's a lot of benefits to be had in those rooms. I'm not sure they're for everybody. And often they're revenue funnels, right? They're ultimately businesses. But you can achieve a lot by getting into those rooms. So if you pay to play, you can also get into some of these networking situations where, again, people are sort of vetted in that they've got skin in the game. They've paid to be there. They've entered the chat, and so to speak. So I think that's a really good resource as well. And yeah, you're right. I mean, if you didn't bring up Britt, right, we wouldn't be talking to Amy. And so that network effect, it's literally called the network effect, is really quite crazy. And you find out very quickly, you're only ever a couple of degrees of separation away from anybody in the world. And so the more you get yourself out there, the more likely it is that you'll fill in the gaps on those connections, and you'll be able to achieve whatever it is that you want. I mean, when I was first getting started, I didn't have credit. I didn't have a lot of cash. I didn't have really much skills. But I just put a lot of consistent effort in, and there was days where I would just raise like $100,000 off the internet very quickly by just simply asking. And so I never thought that was possible. But what I found was like that consistency and that clarity in terms of your goals, and just the drive to continue to push towards that goal, even when it was hard, or even when I didn't really want to, or when it was scary, is the thing that actually unlocked the next levels for me. So it's like, figure out your goal, learn how to get there, bust your ass off and make a million mistakes, admit to those mistakes so that you can find the corrections for them, and then implement those corrections, win, right? Which gives you the energy and enthusiasm you need to want to do it again, because it's a hard, shitty process. And by the end of the deal, you're really disenfranchised about the deal. Like when you buy a property, you get through that reno, those last 2 weeks, like you literally want to shoot yourself before it goes on the market. Once it's on the market and it sells and you get that win, it's like putting wind in your sails, right? It gives you that push to go forward, and you need to ride that high while you still have it, and forget about that disastrous feeling that you actually get when you're wrapping up that deal. Like you're just full of hatred. And so when your wind gets in your sails, just ride that and be like, oh, I didn't hate that so much. Right. And it's like, yeah, you actually did. And you're going to hate the next one too, but that's okay. That's the point. We're back in the gym, baby. And again, it's that fear of going to the gym, not actually being there, that sucks. So I think the real key for today's takeaway is like, do your homework when it's possible. Ask open-ended questions to actually uncover truth from anybody else that might have information that you need when you can't do your homework on it, or you don't understand the homework. Then have massive drive and take massive action towards actually achieving that goal and implementing the strategy that you're learning about. And then go back to the room and return the favor to somebody else. That's the other thing. The highest level of networking is when you can pass down information that you have or knowledge that you have to somebody else who's in a position that you were in the past, who would like to be in your position as you continue to grow. And you'll find that the more you teach, the better you understand. And so I think that's the ultimate sort of circle of life here, is like begin teaching others and they will come to you, and you will benefit from that, and you will become a better communicator in the process, and you'll become even better at communicating your challenges to other people who have the shit that you need. So I think that's really the whole point of this. And the actual thing about all of this is like, you can literally have anything you want if you ask, right? It's just how many times you have to ask it. It might be 100, it might be 1, it might be 1,000, but you will get the thing as long as you put the effort in. So yeah, I would encourage everybody, like, go out, do the thing, come back here every Tuesday. And if you can't make it every Tuesday, whatever, we don't care about that. What I'm saying is go out there, do it, come back on a Tuesday and say, hey, I did the thing, right? I went out, I asked somebody, I got help. Or I went out, I asked somebody, I didn't get the answer I needed. What's the answer, right? And maybe we can help you. But again, like, part of this is a two-way street. Like, Pete and I just yell at the camera all the time. We don't know what the hell you're thinking or what your challenges actually are. I just have to try and imagine what your challenges are, and try and imagine what information I can pass to you. But where you really get answers and where you really get value is if you actually ask us the questions that you're struggling with, and we can get to it. So I'm hoping that we can, again, continue the conversation. And that's the point of these Tuesdays, is for us to just get on here, have an open-ended discussion with you guys. And I can at least read your questions on the chat. Again, that's not as good for building real connection as, you and I being in the same room together. But at the same time, like, if we can help you get information that you need, then you can turn that into knowledge, and you can turn that into leverage, which is what we all started doing this for anyways. So that's my thoughts, Pete.
Yeah, if I could just touch one more thing here about what Cody said about, like, well, what if I'm in isolation and can't attend these networking groups? This is where I think leverage social media. We kind of touched a little bit on it before, but for instance, Cody, maybe you've been watching this channel for a couple of years, or maybe this is your first time watching it. If you've been watching this for a couple of years, this is the first time I've seen you leave a comment. If you were commenting on every single video, I would start to be like, who's this Cody Allen guy? He's commenting on everything. Now, we're the hosts of the channel, but if I'm just a viewer and every time I come to the Canadian Real Estate Channel or any YouTube channel, right? And I see, oh, this guy is in every single video. Like, I'm gonna go check him out. Or on Instagram, this dude, like, obviously don't be too much about it. Like, there's a certain level of balance, as Adam was saying. But if you're in every Instagram comment on all these top like real estate influencers, or maybe the people who are within reach, they don't have hundreds of thousands of followers, they're small enough that you can still connect with them, they're going to be like, man, who is this guy? I got to check him out. He's commenting on everything. He's leaving value. That's one way that I think you can leverage social media is don't be a lurker. Be like, participate, actually comment on stuff. And I think that can go a far way. And one thing that I was going to kind of pose a question to you, Adam, and I'm just going to provide my answer now, but it's like, how do you continue to foster a relationship with someone that you might have met at a physical in-person networking group? And you're like, man, this person's interesting, but I see like they just met 10 other people and they're probably forgot about me. Well, how do I continue to foster that relationship without being too extra or too pushy about it? What I've suggested to people is make sure you actually connect on social media, but then the next day, go like 10 of their posts. Because that next day, they're going to be like, oh man, I had 20 conversations, and maybe one of those conversations I'm going to go leverage, and you were one that they didn't. But then you pop up and you go, oh, I got 10 likes from this guy, and he left a few comments. And then a few days later, you hit them up for a chat, or you like respond to one of their stories. You're then going to stick in their mind. You're going to be top of mind for them. Again, you got to find that little balance of being too much, but I think that's one way to continue to foster these relationships without continually having to show up to these networking groups, is make sure you guys are actually connecting on social media after. And also to make sure that your social media is set up in a way that what you've talked about and discussed, hey, I'm an investor, I have 5 properties. When they come to your profile after, they should clearly see you as an active investor, and maybe you in front of the properties, or you before and after of some of your deals, right? Versus like you talk to someone, you tell them everything about your investing, and they go to your page and it's all about like, I don't know, like skateboarding or something, right? Like, what? This doesn't align. So again, if you have this pre-thought of like, all right, I'm going to build my social media in a way that represents what my goal is when I'm going to these networking events, or not even networking events, but as Adam was saying earlier, when you're just networking in general in life, you're trying to make connections with people at restaurants, wherever you're at, in line at the bank. And you say, hey man, that was a great conversation. Like, let's follow each other on Instagram. And then they go to your Instagram and then they see you rocking the Rolex, and then they see you in front of the property. Like, that's going to solidify like, oh wow, that person wasn't just like talking shit. Like, they're actually legit, because I go check their profile. So I think that can bring you further credibility and foster those relationships after. But I guess, Adam, what are your thoughts there? And is there anything else that people could do that once they do meet someone at a networking event, that they can continue to foster that relationship without being like too like extra about it?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. So the best person I know that is he's truly legendary at this type of thing is Justin Desick. He's a realtor in London, and he truly takes the prize on this. And what Justin does is he'll just call you out of the blue and have an excited, enthusiastic, and generally speaking, like very interested conversation with you, right? So interested people are interesting, right? And so again, he'll call you to talk about you and not to talk about himself. But he'll call you out of the goddamn blue, and he'll just cold call you and just say, like, he'll just have a brilliant 5-minute conversation with you out of the blue. And I love it. And you know what? I actually hate cold calls. I really do. I really hate getting called out of the blue, because I'm like, God damn it. It tells me that you prioritize your time more than mine. But with Justin, I always take the call. There's not even one time that I've been like, nope, not taking it. I take the call every time, because he calls me to talk about me, which makes me happy, because we're all selfish little bastards. And he makes it fun, right? He calls me excited. So I think that that's interesting, right? If you get somebody's number, give them a call. Hey man, we were talking about this. How did that go? Right? And again, this could come down to taking notes to yourself so that you understand, like, okay, I talked about, XYZ with this person. They said they were going to do it by this time. Maybe set a calendar alert to call them at that time and be like, how did that go? Is there anything you need help with? Is there something that went unexpected or something you did right that you didn't think was going to turn out how it did, but it was successful? Like, well, how did that actually turn out? And I think that's interesting. A great resource for people to read would be Blue Fishing. It's by Steve Sims. Fantastic book. I actually had a conversation with him a couple months ago. I was talking with him in LA, and he's super cool dude. He does what he wrote in the book. Like, he's fucking interesting, and he uses some really cool strategies that aren't necessarily high cost, right? So like, he'll book meetings or have conversations. He'll like go to like the best hotel in the city, and you don't have to stay there, but it's a really cool place to have a cocktail, right? Or have a beer, or just grab some of their paper, right? And he'll take paper. He'll ask for a notepad from the bar from like the nicest hotel in the city. And, maybe he'll have a cocktail there, and sure, you spend $20 or whatever on the cocktail, but he'll then take that notepad from that prestigious hotel and handwrite a note to somebody, say, hey, I was just thinking of you, and mail it to them. Right. And it's a badass play. It's a badass play, because now I'm like, damn, Steve's thinking of me. And then I'm like, damn, Steve's thinking of me from the Roosevelt in Nashville. And you're like, dude, that's badass. You look up the Roosevelt. You're like, I wonder what the Roosevelt is. Why would he send it on this paper? And you're like, oh shit, look at the Roosevelt. It's incredible. Right? Like, damn, dude, that's a truly presidential hotel. That's where I stay, by the way, if you guys ever need to go to, anyways, whatever. If you ever need a hotel recommendation, just ask me, because I'm sleeping in some good sheets. But but I got that thread count, baby. But seriously, like, what a genius thing to do. So I would say go read Blue Fishing, and take the time to be genuinely interested in how people are doing. And that's all. That's literally all you need to do. And that's as simple as a 5-minute call or a text.
Mm-hmm. That's a great strategy and idea. So I guess maybe one of the last things we'll kind of wrap up here is like, what's the worst thing you could do? Like, what's the worst situations you've had at a networking event, or you're just like, bro, like, what the hell kind of conversation was that? Or why'd you bring that up? Or like, it really put you off with someone. You're like, man, I never want to see that person again. Or what's the worst thing someone can do?
Yeah. Like, I think it's very off-putting when somebody's pretending to be somebody that they're not. And it's usually very obvious when people are. So like, they dress up, right? If you're playing dress up, it's probably not going to work out how you think, right? Because first of all, you didn't spend the right money on the suit. Second of all, it wasn't tailored properly. And then third, like, we all know that that's like the very first time you've ever put something like that on, and your tie shit, right? So like, just don't do that. Just skip the whole thing. If you don't wear suits, don't wear a suit. Right. And nobody cares about that. It just looks worse when you're pretending to be something that you're not. And that could be in how you dress or how you're speaking, or trying to like, again, like represent something not quite how it is, because anybody with experience that could have helped you will understand very quickly that like, that's not true. Right. And then they question your integrity. Then they never want to work with you, and they have no desire to help. Because helping takes effort, and it's much easier to just say, oh, I'm busy, or to just walk away, than to help you. And so you have to understand, like, by the time you're asking me a question about investing, I've answered the same fucking question 100,000 times. And so the only reason I want to answer it 101,000 times is because I think that you will take that information and use it, and that it will help you. Right? It's not because of me. It's not to make me feel better. It's to help you. And so I think it's very cringe when somebody's trying to misrepresent the facts, or like that, they're lying to you or something. You're just like, God damn it, dude. Like, now I don't want to help you. And it's so easy for me to walk away. And so don't give them a reason to walk away. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Don't dress like how you regularly dress. Don't talk to sound like somebody else. It just doesn't make sense. And then the other thing is just like, again, there's truth and transparency. Transparency is different than truth. So transparency is you saying something. It's like, and then truth is like the whole thing, right? So like, transparency is like you answering me when I ask you a question. Truth is like you coming out and telling me the whole fucking story about like how it happened, how it started, what the background is, how it went, and what you're going to do about it. That's the truth. And so truth is really important in these contexts, because really understanding your situation is how you actually get real answers. And so when somebody doesn't want to tell you the whole situation, or they think they're important somehow, like too important to share with you that the details, like immediately I'm like, no, I don't want to help you, because like I can't trust that you can actually use the information for any type of good. And again, like that is my only satisfaction or my only reward in this interaction, if I'm the one helping you, right? It's knowing that you will be helped, right? Instead of just using my time. So I think that's important. The other thing is like, just again, like 2 ears, 1 mouth, just like ask a question, shut the fuck up, listen to the actual answer, and wait for the real answer, right? Leverage silence, leverage uncomfortable spaces of time where you're not talking so that they will continue talking. Because the person who like asks you a question and then before you're done answering, they fucking ask you a totally different other question. I hate it. It drives me nuts. And I'm like, okay, you don't actually care about what I'm saying. I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to leave. Right. I'm going to go take my 100th pretend piss.
Unless you're genuinely like interested, right? And it's like goes inside with it. But yeah, I like what you said there multiple times now about like asking questions. And I think if you're on the receiving end, like you're the one that's getting all the questions thrown at you, like make sure you're throwing it back, right? Because like that's one of the things that like I've left so many networking events and I'm like, man, I stood there with someone for 10 minutes and like I'm like Adam, right? Like I'll just keep posing questions at you. And now like I know everything about you. But then I walk away from that. I'm like, okay, I know how to help this person, but they don't know how to help me. Like, and it's just like, I know everything about this person. I know their whole life, but they don't know anything about me. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of happy in a way because I don't have to talk about myself. But it's also like, well, what was the point, right? If there was no actual back and forth. So yeah, that's one thing that I'd say is like, make sure that if you're the one that's getting the questions thrown at you, that like you're going to actually throw it back at them. Like use Adam's tactics there. Like obviously don't just stop the conversation, but make sure it's not just all about you. Like you're learning about them. Cause I think that's one of the biggest things for sure on my end, at least.
Yeah. Like I said, interested people are interesting. Right. And, on both ends, like you can be really off-putting too if you're the person with the information and somebody asks you a question and you just kind of blow them off with like a simple answer. And because you like, yes, you have been asked that question 100 million times, but it's like each individual is a new case. It's a new start, and you need to treat it as such. And I think that we have that issue, like, and again, not that we're famous here with this YouTube channel, but like we get asked questions probably more than the average person. And a lot of the times it's the same question or a similar, it's a version of the same question. And so I have like canned responses, and it doesn't feel good to be on the other end of a canned response. And so I like to always try and take the time, and I've not always been good at this. I had to learn how to do this, but I like to take the time to really understand what the person's asking me and why they would be asking it, instead of just responding as I would like an AI chatbot, right? Like, here's the 5 points. The 5 points are ringing in my head, but it's important if you're on this end of the question to understand why somebody's asking you that question to begin with, right? It's because they don't have the capital, or they don't have the partners, or they don't have the information. And I remember the goddamn struggle of how hard that was. And I think it's really important to never forget how hard it was to want to do something so bad, but not have the ability or the tools or the connections or the leverage to do it. And so I think it's important. And like, you have to sometimes forgive the people that you're asking if they give you the canned response, because like it can be exhausting to do these things. But at the same time, like if you're the one being asked the questions, just try, right? Like make an effort. That person's making an effort to break their shell, to get out of their comfort zone, to ask the hard question of you. So like make the effort back. Right. And I think that's a big thing, is like, especially if it's, I mean, I've just, they always say, don't meet your heroes. Right. So I have met people in the networking space where like these people are on paper really crazy. or like they've got huge channels or huge following or huge portfolios or whatever, then you talk to them and you're like, well, that guy was a fucking dick. And then you just hate them after that. Like you just resent them. So I think it's important on all ends of this spectrum to remember to give back and just have some empathy for where the person is at who's asking you a question.
100%. Very well said.
So
guys, if you were questioning or hate networking, did this inspire you to go to a networking event in the next couple of months? Throw some fire emojis or let us know if this inspired you in some way. And if you're watching this later, or maybe you're watching this now, let us know what networking groups or meetups you're going to be at. Let's get this whole comment section filled up with the latest and upcoming networking events, so everyone knows, no matter where it is here in Canada, that there's a way for you guys to connect and meet up together. Hopefully, Cody, if you don't have it there, start up your own networking meetup in Nunavut, right?
Yep.
Be the guy who's the Nunavut real estate networking group guy, right? Like, you have the opportunity to own that position and network and meet other people there. Who knows?
That's a really good point, Pete. And I totally forgot to mention that. But yeah, if it doesn't exist, start it, because there's actually no way that you're the only person. Right. And if you do start it and you are the only person, then just have a beer and go home. And it'll be fun because you got to go have a beer. And guess what you did? You met the bartender, you met the server, you wrote down their names. You remembered something about them because you wrote it down on your phone as well. And now the next time you go back, they're going to know that you're the guy who's trying to do the real estate networking. And at some point, somebody's going to roll through there and they're going to pass on that information. And it's fantastic. And if they don't, and that never happens, you still got to make 2 new friends. It's freaking fantastic. You can't lose with networking. You really can't. And actually, I was thinking too of doing a Collingwood meetup. I think that would be fun. Because I actually don't think there is an investor meetup here at all. So that would be exciting. Do like probably just call it like Simcoe County Real Estate Investing Meetup or something like that. Because like Collingwood's pretty small. So Collingwood, Stain or Wasaga or whatever. But again, like the point of running an event like that is not necessarily to have a bunch of people show up too, right? Like I could run that event just to meet the owner of the bar, right? That's a great reason to do it. Hey, can I come and like rent out your space every month? Or like just attract people to it? Will you help me promote that? Right? Like it's a great way to meet people. So anywho, well, Pete, I think that's it. My beer's empty. So that's a decent signal that it's time to go.
I think this is the first time you finished it during the live stream.
It is. It is.
It at the end.
We got to get you on here more so I can actually enjoy my beer with you guys. Amy, thank you so much for coming on, and especially thank you for actually contributing to the conversation. Like, it's one thing to come and watch this stuff, but to contribute, and especially with a nice compliment like Britt is brilliant. Thank you. Right? It's great. It's always good to pass on the wealth, and we love Britt here, so that's fantastic. And Cody, thanks for tuning in from Nunavut. This is the Canadian Real Estate Channel. We're pretty bad at making Nunavut-based content. But again, we're looking to improve. So thank you for coming on here. You just started your network here. And Cody and all, just reach out anytime. It's Adam JD Martin on all platforms. You can go to adamjdmartin.com if you ever want to book a call. If you want to download my calculator, it's on there as well. And then Pete has social mediation if you want your stuff managed to get better at that. So we're here every Tuesday. So if you guys haven't already, just subscribe and you'll get notifications if we actually if Pete is smart enough to tell me to get my shit together on time so that he can do the work to actually have it scheduled so that you get the notification. Otherwise, just show up at 7:30. We're going to be here for sure. One exception to that is that next week I'm traveling. So if you just got here and you're like, this is amazing, I'm going to be here every week. Next week, we might not. I might try and do it, but I might not be able to. So I will let you guys know. And you can find out updates about that stuff by following the real estate channel on Instagram. So it's Canada_REI or something like that.
Yep.
And then, or just Adam JD Martin. I'll let you guys know on there as well.
Definitely.
Okay. Awesome, so there's lots of ways to connect with us, and you can always reach out with questions. And if it is the 100,000th time I've answered it, don't worry. I'm happy to. That's why we're doing this, why we're here. So I appreciate all of you.